Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Let's Talk Stamps. Today, in this video, I want to share with you 4 stamps that have maps of the Gaza Strip and show Gaza in a political context. Now, in my previous video, I discussed the rise and fall of the Assad regime in Syria through Syrian postage stamps. And I wanted to continue on this theme by looking at Gaza, because we all know that Gaza has been in the news since October 7th, 2023. And I thought it would be interesting to take a closer look at how Gaza, particularly Gaza, is portrayed on postage stamps. And what is interesting is until 1994, the Palestinian people themselves did not produce their own postage stamps that were universally recognized by the Universal Postal Union. There were occasional Cinderella stamps that were used for propaganda purposes, but it wasn't until 1994, with the establishment of the Palestinian National Authority in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, where they have semi-autonomous rule, the images, the symbols on postage stamps of Palestinians, of Palestine, had been developed by non-Palestinians. It was typically Arab or Muslim majority countries that would issue Palestine-themed stamps. So the Palestinians, for decades, were not really masters of their own destiny, so to speak, in terms of how they could influence and control their own narrative. It was outsiders, neighboring Arab states, that would use stamps as a vehicle, along with other vehicles of influence, to convey the Palestine cause. So it just so happens that stamps that portray Gaza specifically come from Egypt. And here are 4 Egyptian stamps featuring Gaza that I want to share with you. Now, the first stamp that we have here is from June 15th, 1948. And the title of this stamp is The Arrival of Egyptian Troops in Gaza. So the timing of this coincides with the Arab-Israeli War of 1948. This was the first Arab-Israeli war, one of several, that began in 1948 after the Jews of Palestine, or what became the Israelis, established their independent state in 1948. After declaring independent Israel, the following day, the neighboring Arab states declared war and invaded Palestine. And in this stamp, you can see there's a lot of imagery going on here. First of all, you can see a portrait of Egypt's ruler, King Farouk, who was the last monarch of Egypt. There's a lot of interesting history about Egypt under the monarchy. The monarchy was a little distinct from the Egyptian population because they tended not to speak Egyptian Arabic. They spoke Turkish, and they descended from a class of elites that were of a Turco-Albanian Circassian class. They were non-Egyptian Arabic speakers, but they did rule Egypt for several centuries. And this is a portrait of King Farouk, who declared war against the nascent state of Israel in 1948. And you can see a map of Palestine. And if you look really closely, Gaza is labeled in English. Palestine is labeled right here in English and Arabic, Palestine. And Egypt is located and labeled in English and Arabic in the south. So you can see a bunch of Egyptian soldiers amassing from the south, preparing to enter in the north into Gaza. And after the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, Egypt occupied the Gaza Strip or administered the Gaza Strip. And Egyptian rule of Gaza lasted from 1948 until 1967 when the Israelis conquered the land from Egypt. And it has remained under overall Israeli control ever since. So this is one stamp issued by Egypt that shows Gaza. It shows a map of Palestine, but Gaza is labeled here. And I think that's a really interesting stamp to show Egypt's wartime effort, mobilizing support for the war to liberate Palestine, ostensibly from the Zionists, from the Israelis, and to support the Palestinian Arabs of the land. But of course, one of the outcomes of this war was that a slice of the original British mandate for Palestine, which had existed from 1922 until 1948, that is the Gaza region, that fell under Arab control. That was placed under Egyptian administration. Egypt, after 1948, controlled the Gaza Strip, and another Arab victor of the 1948 war was Jordan, which after the war also came under control of a segment of Palestinian territory, which was the West Bank and Eastern Jerusalem, including the Old City, which contains the Islamic and Jewish and Christian holy places. So this was issued in 1948. And in 1947, so a decade later, Egypt issued two more stamps specifically of the Gaza Strip. And this was from May 4th, 1957. And the Stanley Gibbons catalog describes this stamp as the reoccupation of the Gaza Strip. Egypt would refer to it as the liberation of Gaza Strip. Why? Because the timing of the issuing of these stamps coincides with the 1956 Suez War, in which Israel, France, and the United Kingdom invaded Egypt in response to President Gamal Abdel Nasser's nationalization of the Suez Canal Company, which the British and French had been major shareholders in the Suez Canal, so they viewed nationalization as an economic assault, and France already had its own concerns with Nasser, with Egypt during this time for Egypt's support of Algerian independence movements, which challenged and threatened French colonial rule over Algeria. So they were really looking to punish Nasser, and the Israelis had already, at this time, didn't really need a whole lot of justification for an excuse to wage war because Egypt was, at this time, under Nasser, a belligerent state. Egypt had already fought a war with Israel in 1948. It remained in a state of war. And Nasser, who came to power after he and his free officers, his Egyptian free officers, overthrew King Farouk, he came to power in 1954. He became president in 1956. And one of his major foreign policy goals was pan-Arabism, the unification of all the Arabic-speaking peoples from North Africa and the Middle East. He was vehemently anti-Zionist and anti-Israel, and really challenged the existence of Israel and supported groups that were committed to Israel's destruction. So that was 1956 Suez. Israel temporarily occupied Gaza during the Suez War, but the United Nations compelled Israel to relinquish that territory, and it reverted back under Egyptian control by 1957. So Egypt had issued two stamps of the reoccupation of Gaza or the lib, uh, liberation of Gaza, depending on your perspective. One of these stamps, and again, these were both issued at the same time. One of these is an overprint of Palestine, and you can look closely and you can see the word Palestine in English and Arabic. And what's fascinating also about this stamp is you have the map where you can see Egypt labeled, you can see Gaza labeled with several cities inside the Gaza Strip labeled, but there's a little caption right here in English and Arabic, and it says Gaza, part of the Arab nation. It does not say Gaza, part of Palestine or part of the Palestinian nation. It says part of the Arab nation because, again, the context is important here. During the 1950s and 1960s, with the rise of Pan-Arabism, Gaza, Palestine more broadly, was chiefly viewed as a Arab collective responsibility. And under the tenets of Pan-Arabism, Gaza and Palestine was framed as an Arab issue. Yes, of course it impacted the Palestinians first and foremost, but it was believed to be an Arab responsibility to liberate Palestine, which is also sometimes viewed as a euphemism for confronting and fighting, even destroying Israel at the time. But it was that liberation of Palestine that was viewed as an Arab responsibility and prerogative. So the framing of Gaza was not necessarily viewed during this time as a Palestinian issue alone, but rather it was in the context of a broader Arab framework. So I really like these stamps. They're really colorful. And the final stamp that I am aware of during this time, during the Nasser period, so from the 1950s until Nasser's death in 1970, was a stamp issued by Egypt on March 7th, 1962. And once again, you have a map, and this map, it does not delineate any of the borders or boundaries of any country. Rather, it's just an outline of where the countries should be in the Eastern Mediterranean of the Levant region. But the only city that is labeled in this map is Gaza in both English and Arabic. And you can see that there appears to be a family, an Arab family, hoisting the flag of Egypt. The man or the father is wearing traditional Arab headdress, and the wife is donning traditional modest clothing covering her hair. And there is a small child clutching the mother, and they are gazing toward Gaza. And this has several implications. It can demonstrate solidarity and support for Pan-Arabism, Arab unity, support for Egypt, support for Syria. From 1958 until 1961, Egypt and Syria had merged together into one country known as the United Arab Republic. So Arab solidarity and the aspirations of Arab unity were particularly strong during this period. It also, equally can refer to and symbolize the aspirations of the Palestinians to return to Palestine, to return to their original homes in Palestine after they had been displaced during the Palestine Civil War between the Jews and Arabs of Palestine in 1948. So Palestine-themed stamps broadly remained a constant theme among Egyptian stamps, as well as other Arab and Muslim majority stamps since 1948, even to the present. But for stamps that just highlight Gaza, I believe these are the select few that do. So I just really wanted to share these with you because they really are fascinating and they do offer a snapshot of history. Stamps are more than just little pieces of paper. They are or it can be political messages. They can seek to influence populations because, after all, they are primary documents that require official government approval. So it's really neat just to look at what types of imagery and messaging and symbolism countries devote to discuss topics like Gaza. So that's all for now. If you like this video, please take a moment to hit that like and subscribe button. Share this with friends and family. That really helps grow the channel, and I really appreciate it. Also, as we are approaching the holiday season, if you haven't already done so, please take a moment to take a look at my stamp template and stamp country template that I am offering on my website. Many of you have asked about this, and for a time I had offered it for free, but now for a modest price, I am offering this to help you enhance and take your stamp collection to the next level. So I will leave a description in this video for you to view. And as always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. So until next time, happy stamping.